The first sandhill crane that I ever saw was at the old Metro Toronto Zoo, now the Toronto Zoo. It was a rare migrant that had flown into the zoo to feed with the Canada geese that were being fed there. It was back in the 1970s, and it was a big event. Sandhill cranes were very rare in southern Ontario. There was and still is a population of sandhill cranes in western Ontario that migrate through Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois, and they number about 40 to 85,000. The number varies each year. But in southern Ontario, they were very rare. Today, however, they have become much more common. And in the fall migration, it's not unusual to see up to 300 to even 800 of these birds down at Long Point. But they show up all over the province. There'll be 70 seen in Ottawa, 60, 70 seen over in Barrie. They seem to be coming from everywhere. It looks like the population that was in the western part of Ontario has expanded its range into southern Ontario. Sandhill cranes are mainly herbivorous. That means they mainly plants, although they will occasionally take the odd insect, fish, or even a small reptile or amphibian. But in the fall, they are mainly plant eaters, and they will eat a variety of crops grown by human beings. Old cornfields are especially attractive. And this might help explain the sudden resurgence of the sandhill cranes in southern Ontario. It is likely that with farmers leaving more corn and wheat in their fields to go fallow, the sandhill cranes have found a new source of food, and this is helping boost their population. But they also need a good place to nest, and a nesting place for a sandhill crane is very specialized. It's usually a wetland, and they can certainly be found in our larger wetlands like Point Pelee and Long Point. But they will also make use of smaller wetlands throughout southern Ontario, up as far as North Bay and perhaps even further. Southern Ontario's sandhill cranes nest probably in April. The female will lay 1 to 3 eggs. Usually they successfully raise 1 or 2 chicks. And if you look at these videos, you can often discern small groups of 3 or 4 birds hanging together. That's probably the parents and the chicks. The chicks stay with their parents for about a year until the next eggs are laid. And then they go off and look for a bog or a marsh or a swamp where they too can find a place to breed, although that may be several years later. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, the parents brood and feed the chicks, but they are soon able to follow their parents and go off on foraging expeditions with them for food. Sandhill cranes, especially young sandhill cranes, have many enemies. Raccoons, snakes, coyotes, and not so much in Ontario, bobcats will take a number of them. Bald eagles will also prey on them, but for the adults, it's mainly large predators that are a threat in the fall. Sandhill cranes are very social birds. They like to flock together, and huge flocks, up to 10,000, can be seen in the prairie provinces and states during migration. But in Ontario, a flock of 300 to 800 birds is still quite a sight. Sandhill cranes can become quite large and can weigh up to 5 kilograms, although 2 to 3 kilograms is more the norm. Recently, they've become popular with hunters, although not so much in southern Ontario, but out west they are hunted. And the population overall is fairly stable, with about 400,000 sandhill cranes living in North America. There are several populations. Every year I look forward to the fall and the return of the migration of the sandhill cranes. May their numbers continue to grow, and may the migration last for decades and centuries to come.